Yeah. And again, I mean, like you would hope, and I mean, it'd be awfully cynical to say that people are doing this only for sporting gain, but that you'd hope that the reason they are transitioning their gender is larger than to gain a competitive advantage in high school track and field. You'd hope.
Or even college. I mean,
or college. Yeah. I mean, you'd hope that there's other reasons that person wants to make that transition, and that that justifies the change. And if there are bigger reasons, then maintaining an athletic career for another couple of years at the high school or even college level, shouldn't be something that would dissuade them from making the transition.
Well, shout out to one of my favorite movies, a hood classic, in Joanna Man.
That was fucking dreadful. That was bad, man.
And I'll tell you this. I mean, I just recently turned 50.
Okay.
All right? And
I'm not far behind you.
Yeah, I would guarantee you that if I were to get into the women's division of weightlifting and they're 50-year-old women, I'm going to be in the top 1 or 2% in that.
All right.
Now, that's not fair because I'm competing in a competition where I'm naturally stronger, that I naturally have certain strength abilities that women do not have. And so when you have these men or these young boys who are competing against young ladies, it's just unfair. I mean, look at the development of girls versus boys. And I have a daughter who runs track, and her event is the 400. And I can almost guarantee you that the slowest runner in the 400 is faster than my daughter. And just imagine if a young man who's running the 400 decides they want to compete with the young ladies. Now all of a sudden, the young girls who are working hard and training hard, they're now being put up against individuals who have just naturally greater abilities, greater strength, greater speed. That it's just not a fair fight, so to speak. So
now I have many lanes, but this is not one of them. So when I ask this, it comes from a place of ignorance. So now they are taking hormones and things, or a lack thereof, or something along those lines. Correct? Would that not affect their performance in a
To some extent, some are taking hormones.
Okay.
Not all of these individuals who are competing are taking hormones or hormone treatments. But even at that, the hormone treatments will reduce certain testosterone levels, but it's not going to take it fully away. You're still talking about men here.
Exactly.
And even with these hormone treatments, there's a book that recently, about a year or so came out, and it talks about children or young adults who take these hormone therapies and still compete in sports that is in a separate gender, and they're outperforming even with these hormone treatments. And so we know that even if they're taking hormones, they still have a natural advantage over someone who is the same age, possibly a little bit smaller than them. They're still going to have a natural advantage even if they're having hormone treatments.
Wow.
And there's an interesting counterpoint, because and I understand the gender position, but in athletics, I mean, there is a genetic component that makes some people better than others, period.
Anyway.
Even in the men's sport, in the women's sport, certain people are just physical marvels, and size, strength, speed, and what they do, and you already have to factor that in. I mean, you go back in time to like a Wilt Chamberlain or what we see with LeBron James, and he's just a better athlete than every other person in basketball and damn near everybody in every other sport, and he's winning a ton because of that. So I mean, at some level, in pure competition terms, we have to accept that some people are better than others. But where do we draw that line and say that we want to create some sort of pool of fairness in creating these competitions? I mean, at truth, that's why we have men's and women's teams to begin with. And the reality is, at this point in our history, there's not enough transgendered competitors to create independent divisions or independent teams in these various sports. So it's and I don't know that we'll ever get there, but it raises a lot of interesting questions to that.
I could see us getting there. I mean, who knew we would be here?
Yeah,
that's true.
I mean?
Yeah,
now,
true.
And the tricky thing is that because of, they can make an argument of, I guess, that after the hormones or lack thereof, that they're not capable to compete in the men's, whatever. But what is the argument? What was the argument for these states who are allowing this, that that they can go transition to the women's sports, and that they should be allowed to, that there's no issue with that? What is the argument there?
So listen, that's a great question, and I'm gonna tell you this. On the show that we have, a lot of times we talk politics, and there are few times in our society when politics and sports find themselves on a crash collision of an issue. And this is just one of those political issues, if you really and truly ask me, with regards to what's taking place with the current environment politically with LGBT, ensuring that individuals have the rights and abilities to identify with who they want to identify with or whomever they feel that they are, and not impeding on their rights to say, hey, I identify with this. But the problem is, when you allow someone to identify with a certain gender and compete against someone of a different gender, what you're now doing is you're taking a political argument or a political statement, placing it into the sports arena, to where now you're creating unfair competition and advantage to the person who wants to identify as a gender that they are not. Now, when we talk about how sports and politics collide, I mean, I'm a huge fan of sports figures having a place in the political arena. I mean, look at Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest athletes of all times, and what he stood up for that became a political collision course. Let's talk about, the issues that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar faced. Let's even talk about here and now with Colin Kaepernick and how politics and sports have collided. But that had nothing to do with the gender of the individuals. That had to do with the social statement. But in this case, the argument, as you aptly stated, the argument they have is that these individuals who want to identify with being female have the right to do so and should be able to do so without discrimination, which I agree with, unless and until it affects someone else's ability to compete in that same sport.
Mm-hmm. And then you're almost reversing the discrimination on that. The
Exactly.
pendulum of discrimination goes against the natural-born female athlete, competing on what would otherwise be a level playing field in their chosen endeavor.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, like, you would hope, and I mean, it'd be awfully cynical to say that people are doing this only for sporting gain, but that you'd hope that the reason they are transitioning their gender is larger than to gain a competitive advantage in high school track and field. You'd hope.
Or even college. I mean,
or college. I mean, you'd hope that there's other reasons that person wants to make that transition, and that that justifies the change. And if there are bigger reasons, then maintaining an athletic career for another couple of years at the high school or even college level, shouldn't be something that would dissuade them from making the transition.
Well, shout out to one of my favorite movies, a hood classic, in Joanna Man.
That was fucking dreadful. That was bad, man.
Well, he got into the WNBA and just dominated, know. Well, it wasn't a WNBA; it was like an overseas women's league, but what have you. But that's just the case. But it wasn't for a bigger gain. For that, in that point in time, it was just to gain that advantage, if you will,
right,
over the other women. And
I mean, but think about this though, Bubba. And if we took, and let's take LeBron, let's take some of the great players out. Let's put a middle of the road player in the NBA, and let's say if we take that player and put him in the WNBA, what impact would he have?
Huge, like even a DJ Augustine, a 5'11", guard.
I was kind of thinking of Evan Fournier, but
now let's take that same argument and say, let's take a middle of the road female WNBA player, place her in the NBA,
well,
and what
even the
impact
best
would
of
she
the
have?
best. Remember, there was some steam behind Brittany Griner when she came out of college.
There
was some steam behind that she could possibly play in the NBA.
I've always hated that. I coached many years ago. I coached basketball at Trinity Prep. I had a 7th grade team. It was the first coaching job I had in basketball, and the girls' high school coach would ask us to scrimmage them, and they were the varsity girls. They were 17, 18 years old, the seniors on the team. We were 7th graders, 12, maybe 13 years old. We routinely smashed them.
Wow.
Like, I mean, we were a pretty good 7th grade team, but I didn't. Nobody on that team, went on to be like Division I player or anything.
Wow.
It was. I mean, we would routine. I mean, and when I say smack, I mean they had a trouble getting into an offense. They had a trouble getting clean looks. We got whatever we wanted on offense.
I'm a little sketchy on that story because you remember the fifth and sixth graders who whooped us when I was a grown man. So.
That speaks volumes about your ability on the court.
Yeah.